The trailhead was empty except for one old Subaru with a cracked kayak rack and a bumper sticker that said the mountains are calling. Eli noticed it because there should have been more cars. On a Saturday in late October, the lot at Blackwood Ridge was always half full by sunrise, but that morning there was only his truck, the Subaru, and a silence that seemed too large for the trees. No birdsong, no chatter of other hikers packing bottles and tightening laces, just the hush of cold air moving through pine needles. He checked his phone before starting. No service. Not unusual. He locked the truck, adjusted the straps on his day pack, and headed up the trail. The first mile was easy. The path climbed steadily through cedar and birch, wet leaves dark underfoot, the forest smelling of earth and stone and something faintly metallic, like rain that hadn't started yet. Eli liked hiking alone. The solitude usually felt clean, uncomplicated, but the quiet this morning pressed on him. About 40 minutes in, he stopped to drink from his bottle and listened. Nothing. No squirrel rustling in brush, no crows, no wind now. The woods looked normal, but the silence was so complete it felt staged, as though the forest had paused and was waiting for direction. He laughed once under his breath, trying to shake it off. Then he saw the man. He was about 50 yards up the trail, standing perfectly still beside a dead hemlock. Eli had no idea how long he'd been there. The man wore hiking clothes that were almost right, gray shell jacket, tan pants, boots, a navy knit cap, but everything sat oddly on him like he had dressed by following written instructions without ever seeing a human body. His jacket sleeves were too short, exposing pale wrists, his pants bunched wrong at the knees. His boots were unlaced, yet snug. He stood with both arms hanging straight at his sides, hands open, fingers slightly spread. Eli raised a hand, mourning. The man did not answer. He turned his head slowly, not naturally, but in a deliberate segmenting motion, as if his neck had stiff points in it. His face came into view. At first, Eli couldn't say what was wrong. A man's face, thin, colorless, clean-shaven. Then the details began to separate. His eyes were too large, not in some cartoonish way, just slightly too wide, the irises too dark, with almost no visible white. His mouth was narrow and lipless. His ears seemed pressed too close to his skull, and when he blinked, both lids came down too slowly, out of sync by a fraction of a second. Eli felt cold between his shoulders. "You okay?" he asked. The man's expression did not change. Yes. The voice was flat and precise, like a recording played through a speaker with dead batteries. "Need help?" The man tilted his head the other way. "Do you need help?" Eli smiled uneasily. "No, I'm good." The man stared at him. Eli stepped forward because the trail narrowed there, and he didn't want to turn around over some weird encounter. "All right, well, have a good hike." As he passed, he caught a smell coming off the man, a sour chemical odor like hot plastic and pennies. The man said very quietly, "You should not go higher." Eli stopped. "Why?" The man looked past him into the woods. "They are almost ready." Eli waited for a grin, some sign of a joke. None came. A thud sounded somewhere uphill. Then another. Not footsteps too heavy, too far apart. Eli turned instinctively toward the sound, and when he looked back, the man was gone. Not walking away, gone. The trail behind him was empty in both directions. His throat tightened. There was nowhere the man could have disappeared that fast. Brush hemmed the trail on one side, a steep drop on the other. Eli took 2 steps back, scanning the trees. Hello. No answer. He told himself he had just missed him moving off trail. That was all, some bizarre loner messing with people. He started hiking again, faster now. The trail climbed to a switchback and crossed a rocky shoulder with views through the trees into the valley below. Eli usually stopped there for photos. This time he kept moving. The sense of being watched had settled over him completely. At the next bend, he found tracks in the mud. Bare feet. Human-shaped but wrong. Too long, too narrow, the toes thin as sticks and set too far apart. They came out of the undergrowth, crossed the trail, and disappeared into the trees on the other side. He crouched and stared. The mud inside each print was wet and black, though everything else around it was drying under the morning sun. A sound rolled across the ridge. It wasn't thunder, it was thinner, higher, a vibrating metallic hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Eli felt it in his teeth before he heard it fully. The bottles in his pack rattled, the laces on his boots quivered against the leather. Then the forest changed. The light dimmed without clouds passing overhead, shadows bent in strange directions. A curtain of static rippled through the trees, making trunks blur and double and then snap back into focus. Eli stumbled, grabbed a branch, and looked up. Above the ridge, hanging between the treetops and the sky, was something vast and pale. At first his mind refused to parse it. It was not saucer-shaped, not sleek, not mechanical in any way he understood. It looked grown more than built, a swollen oval mass, pearly and ridged like bone under translucent skin. Its underside opened and closed in slow muscular folds, revealing rows of dim white lights recessed deep within. It made no sound now, yet the hum continued in Eli's skull. He ran. He didn't think. He spun and sprinted downhill, branches whipping his face, his boots skidding on roots and stone. He made it 20 yards before the air around him thickened like gelatin. His body jolted to a stop so hard his knees buckled. He pitched forward but never hit the ground. His feet lifted. Eli screamed. He was rising through the trees, dragged upward on nothing. Pine boughs scraped his legs, needles tore at his jacket. His pack twisted off one shoulder and dropped away, tumbling back to the forest floor. He clawed at branches, bark ripping under his nails, but his hands kept slipping as though his grip had no force behind it. The opening in the thing above widened. Light poured down. Not bright, worse than bright, it was a white so flat and total it seemed to erase distance. Eli could not tell how far he was from the object or whether he was moving quickly or slowly. His stomach convulsed. He tried to shut his eyes, but the light was still there behind his lids. Then he was inside. He fell a short distance onto a smooth black surface slick as glass. The air was hot and wet and carried that same odor, hot plastic, copper rot. He scrambled onto hands and knees and vomited. When he wiped his mouth and looked up, he realized the floor was slightly curved, as though he were inside a vast shell. The walls pulsed faintly. Veins or cables ran beneath them, glowing with a dull milk blue light. Far off, something clicked and chattered. "Help!" he shouted. The word came back to him, flattened and distorted, as if the room had repeated the shape of the sound without understanding it. He got to his feet. The chamber around him was enormous, but sections of it narrowed into arching passages. Along the walls stood upright shapes behind translucent membranes, human-sized. He moved closer. Bodies. Naked, hairless, pale under the skin of the pods. Some were clearly human. A woman with a surgical scar on her abdomen, an old man with tattoos on both forearms, a teenage boy with his mouth hanging open, eyes shut. And others were not. One had limbs too long for its torso, folded backward at the joints. One had a head that narrowed sharply at the chin and no visible nose, only 2 slits. Another was small, child-sized, with glossy black eyes wide open and focused directly on Eli, though the thing did not move. He staggered back. A shape detached itself from the dark passage ahead. Then another. Then 4 more. They were about the height of children, but horribly thin, with gray skin stretched tight over ribs. Their heads were bulbous, their eyes enormous and liquid black, their mouths little more than cuts. They walked with quick, delicate movements, almost prancing, and their hands had too many joints. One came close enough for Eli to hear a faint clicking inside its throat. "No," he said, backing away. "No, stay the hell away from me." The being stopped, its eyes widened impossibly. A pressure entered his head, not pain at first, but intrusion. "Do not damage yourself." The words were not heard, they simply appeared inside him. Eli clapped both hands over his ears and screamed. The creature tilted its head. Another moved behind him with shocking speed. Something sharp touched the base of his neck. Every muscle in his body locked. He stayed standing, frozen upright, aware of everything. That was the worst part later when he tried to understand it, not paralysis, awareness. He could feel the sweat cooling on his back, the tick of his pulse in his gums, the scrape of his own eyelashes when he blinked. He just couldn't move. The beings guided him down the passage. Doors did not open, the walls softened and parted like flesh. Beyond was a room that looked too much like an operating theater interpreted by a sadist. A table rose from the floor, all curves and restraints that flexed like tendon. Instruments hung from above, not metallic but translucent and wet-looking, some ending in hair-thin tendrils, some in spoon-like cups that rotated by themselves, some in hooks so small they were almost delicate. Something was lying on the table already. A person. The face turned slightly as Eli was brought closer. The man from the trail. Or what had looked like a man. Up close the disguise was unraveling. The skin on his face had split in neat seams around the jawline and temples, peeling back to reveal a smooth gray surface beneath. One eye had slipped sideways in its socket, exposing black, glassy tissue behind it. The mouth opened too wide. Inside were tiny square teeth packed like a fish's. It looked at Eli with calm recognition. "You should not have gone higher," it said in the same dead voice. Eli made a sound that was almost a sob. The small beings hoisted him onto another table. Restraints grew over his wrists, ankles, chest, forehead. They were warm, living. They tightened in pulses until he could barely breathe. The room darkened except for one cone of white light over his body. The off-man turned his ruined face toward him. Observation of fear response continues. Then the pain began. A filament descended into Eli's left nostril, impossibly deep, threading into places that should not feel touch. His vision burst with color. He felt another instrument press against his abdomen and pass through skin without cutting, a cold pressure moving among organs. Something clamped onto one of his teeth. Another thing unfolded his right eye and held it open while lights flickered directly onto the surface. He wanted to pass out. They would not let him. Every time blackness gathered, a pulse shot through the restraints and slammed him back awake. The beings moved around him with efficient, emotionless care, except they were not emotionless. Once he saw one lean closer to watch his face as a longer instrument entered his ear canal, and in the reflection of its black eye he saw fascination, curiosity, not hatred, worse, the absorbed interest of a child pulling wings from an insect. The off-man spoke as they worked. Memory structure resilient. Pain indexing elevated. Self-model instability beginning. "What do you want?" Eli rasped. The face above him bent nearer. The false skin had fallen farther away, hanging in strips. Beneath it, the thing was smooth and hairless, with nostril slits and no ears at all. "To understand the separation point," it said. "Between what?" It smiled incorrectly. "Between the animal and the signal." A tendril slid beneath Eli's eyelid. He screamed until his throat tore. Time broke after that. There were rooms filled with suspended water, and in the water shapes that kicked weakly from inside transparent sacs. There was a corridor where the walls were lined with human teeth set in rows like seashells. There was a chamber where he heard voices coming from nowhere, his mother calling his name, his college roommate laughing, his own voice saying, "Turn around, turn around, turn around." At one point he was able to move again, and ran through a low passage into a circular room filled with screens. But they were not screens. Each was an oval window showing a place on Earth at night, a highway rest stop, a child's bedroom, a hospital corridor, a fishing pier, a gas station in the desert. At each site stood one or more figures that looked almost human, watching, waiting. An invasion by replacement, Eli thought wildly, that old fear from stories and films. Then one of the windows changed. It showed Blackwood Ridge. His own body lay on the trail below, motionless on the leaves, while a figure in his clothes rose and brushed dirt from its sleeves. The thing wore Eli's face. Not well, just well enough. It turned as if hearing him through the window and smiled with his mouth. The beings found him there. This time they did not bother guiding him gently. A force struck him from behind and drove him face first into the floor. Something pierced the base of his spine. He convulsed. A voice entered his mind, not one of theirs, but many layered together. The copy requires calibration. The copy requires memory integrity. The copy requires emotional architecture. He felt fingers inside his scalp. He felt his thoughts being touched. Not read, handled. Images rose up without his consent. His father teaching him to skip stones, the smell of his first apartment, the face of a girl he loved once and lied to, his dog dying under fluorescent lights in a vet's office, the stupid jingle from an ad he hadn't heard in years. Each memory flashed brighter than life and then dimmed as though copied. He tried to hold on to one thing, one private center they couldn't take. He thought of the cold morning air at the trailhead, the shape of ordinary sunlight on gravel, the sound of boots on dirt, home, home, home. Something in his head tore. He woke in the parking lot at dusk. He was lying on his side beside his truck, covered in dried mud and pine needles. Every joint hurt, his tongue was swollen. There was blood under both nostrils and a crescent-shaped bruise on his throat. For several minutes he could only lie there watching the sky deepen through the branches. The Subaru was gone. He forced himself up and fumbled for his keys. His phone was in the truck, dead. When he looked in the mirror, he almost crashed into the steering wheel. There were tiny dark spots in the whites of both eyes, arranged in neat arcs like pinpricks. He drove down the mountain in the dark with no music, no thoughts, just a raw animal need to reach other people. The first gas station he found was bright and ugly and miraculous. He stumbled inside, babbling about assault, kidnapping, something in the woods. The clerk kept backing away. "Sir," the clerk said, "you came in here yesterday." Eli stared at him. "What?" "Yesterday afternoon, same clothes. You bought water and asked for directions to Blackwood Ridge." "That's not possible." The clerk's expression shifted from fear to pity. "You okay, man?" Eli ran out. He drove home too fast, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. His apartment was locked. Inside, all the lights were off. But someone had been there. A mug sat in the sink with fresh coffee grounds in it. Mud streaked the bathroom tile. On the kitchen table was a yellow legal pad from his desk. On the top page, in his handwriting, was a single sentence written over and over until the pen had nearly torn through. "I am still under observation. I am still under observation. I am still under observation." His bedroom door was closed. He never remembered crossing the apartment to it, only standing outside with one hand on the knob and a pressure building in his ears like deep water. From inside came a soft voice. His own voice. "Practicing. Morning." A pause. "You okay?" A longer pause. Then flatter. "Do you need help?" Eli backed away. The bedroom door opened by an inch. In the gap he saw one huge black eye reflecting the hall light.